Alrighty, so this week, we're still in chapter 4. We are part 3, which is going to be the last part of chapter 4. So last week, we ended off at the end of page 62, where model of bookcase starts. And so this week, we will be modeling a bookcase. And it's going to go pretty much step by step, just like we did last week with the table. But there are a few extra things that I just want to go over really quickly before we get into the actual modeling assignment. And so then you'll read through the end of the chapter. Oh, we're also going to make a clock, so we're making 2 things today. Read through the end of the chapter, basically step by step, but we're going to take a look at a few more things here before we get started. Okay, so a very big concept that we're going to learn this week are your array tools. Array just meaning creating equally spaced copies. So instead of just copying something 5 times, you can just use this linear array tool and it'll make those copies for you equally spaced. And there are 2 different ways that we can do a linear array. There's linear array, so copying things in a line, linear, and then there's also radial array, copying things around a circle or half circle, around an angle, basically. We're going to practice both of them in our assignment today, both linear and radial, which is why we're making both a bookcase and a clock. But let's just kind of look at how to do that before we get started. So let's start with linear array, creating equally spaced copies in a straight line. So 2 ways that you can do this. You can either have your initial object create a copy at the furthest distance away that you're going to want it, and then fill in that space between them with a bunch of copies at equally spaces. Or you can take your original object, make a copy at a specified distance, and then just make a bunch of copies after that, maintaining that same distance. So we'll look at how to do both of those. I'm going to go ahead and just make a cube to show. And I'm going to make it a group just so it's a little bit easier for me to work with. I don't want to have to keep selecting everything about the cube each time. So let's look at the first one where we have kind of a specified end distance. And I'm just going to create lines here. Let's say that my furthest endpoint is just going to be somewhere way off here. So I basically want to copy this cube several times, and this is going to be where the furthest away cube goes. So to do that, I'm going to grab my object, my cube in this instance. I'm going to copy it, so M for move, Control for copy. You see that plus sign come up next to your cursor. So I'm going to copy this to my furthest away endpoint. So that's going to become my very last cube in this array. And I click to finish it, and then immediately we type the backslash, the one that shares with the question mark. Is that a backslash or a forward slash? I don't really know, but it's the one that shares with the question mark. You immediately type that, and then the number of copies that you want. So you are not taking into consideration the original, but you are taking into consideration this final one that we just copied. So if I put /5, enter, this last one became that 5th copy, and it gave me 4 equally spaced cubes between. If I went and measured each of these are all going to be equally spaced distance. 9, 5, and an 8, 9, 5, and an 8. Yep, they're all equally spaced. So for that one, I copied to the furthest point, put it in place, backslash the total number of copies that you're wanting. The other option, I'm going to go ahead and make another cube over here. The other option is I know exactly what the spacing I want between each of my copies is, and then I can make however many going on and on forever and ever, just maintaining that specific distance. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my cube, M for move, Control for copy, and let's say that I want each one to be 5 feet apart from each other. So I'm going to go ahead, start this copy, and I'm going to type in my 5 feet, enter. And remember, that didn't put 5 feet between the two cubes, it put 5 feet from that initial starting point to that ending point. So then after I create that first copy, I'm going to type immediately the X key and then the total number of copies I want. So I'll go ahead and type X5, enter. And that first one I made is my first copy, so then it created 4 additional copies for that total of 5. And each of these, so I created that 5 feet, these should each be 5 feet apart from each other. So whichever method you use really depends on, do I know the spacing between each of my objects, or do I know the first and last of what I want, and then I just want to fill in that space between? So if it's the first and last option, you use the slash. If it's the specified distance option, you use X. And again, you are placing the copy, so go ahead and finish out that copy command, but then before you do anything else, that's when you'll type either that backslash number of copies or X number of copies. Yes?
I have a question. How do you make a copy of something? So you put the control, when it's the plus sign, what do you do from there?
Yes, let me show it again. Get my object back. So for copy, we're using the move tool. So select your object first, M for move, or grab move up from your toolbar. You click Control to activate the copy, and that's when you'll see the plus sign at your cursor. And then it's basically just like moving the object. You grab it, start to move away, and you can either click to finish, or you could specify that distance of whatever it might be, 5 feet.
Like grabbing the corner.
Yeah, it's good to, I like selecting a very, just like a good point to start at. You can be kind of off here in the middle of nowhere, but I think it's just nice to be very specific. You can control it better. If you're trying to align to an edge or an end point, it'll be much easier if you have clicked on that specific point and can move it there.
Okay, so when do you press control? When you're on the cube or after you? I guess that's why I'm losing. Because my thing is coming up with a circle. I don't know what that's all about.
It doesn't matter when you hit control. I have my object selected, and hit M for move.
Okay.
You can hit control for copy right there before you even grab your cube.
Okay.
Or you can M for move, and then you realize that, oh, I did want copy, just hit that control key, and it'll go back to copy for you.
And how do you do multiples again?
That's with our linear array. That one you want to either, if you know your furthest end point, we copy to that furthest end point, go ahead and place it, and then immediately type the backslash and the number of copies that you want and hit enter. if you know the specific distance between, still kind of the same process, go ahead and make a copy, but type in that specific distance that you want between them. So I'm just gonna do 5 feet, enter. So now my copy is placed. And then for this method, I'm gonna type X, and then 5, or however many copies you want, and hit enter.
And you said to do it right after the control, but what if you got out of that step? Just get back into it to do the multiple copy.
What do you mean out of that step?
Well, to put the slash or the X and however many you want to copy, you had to do it right after the move and control key. But what if you got out of that step?
You want to actually complete your copy first before you type those. If you get messed up or something, and you can always just either hit the escape key, go back to where you were, or just Control Z, undo what you've done, and then try your copy again. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Until I actually do it. And then
We'll get more practice, don't you worry. Okay.
So you hold on to it and then you type backslash. And
You want to place that copy first, completely finish that operation.
right.
Yeah, so go ahead and place it, and then type in.
Oh, so you don't have to click on another one again to make it array?
Nope, you just
Oh.
make that copy, and then do the /5.
Oh, you just type in /5, but do I have to check one of them? Do I have to have one selected?
You shouldn't have to, because SketchUp knows that you're creating that command on whatever you've just done.
Okay.
As long as you don't touch anything else between typing that in, it should be good to go for you.
I don't know.
We'll practice more on our book.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was linear array.
Okay.
Radial array, basically the same thing, but we're gonna do it around some angle instead of in a line. So for this one, I'm actually gonna look at a top view. That just might be a little bit easier for me. So I'm gonna get rid of this cube too and just start from scratch. So first I'm just gonna set my view. This just makes it easier on me. I go to camera, standard views, top, so I'm looking top down. And then camera again, parallel projection, and that gives you more of that two-dimensional view. You're not gonna see any perspective for it. So just so that this is a little bit easier to show, I'm gonna create myself some guidelines. And the intersection of these guidelines is just gonna act as my kind of center of rotation for my radial array. Let's go ahead and create an object right here. So basically what I'm going to do is copy this object in an array in a circle. And this intersection is going to be where that center of rotation is kind of taken on. So for that, I need to use the rotate tool. Did we use? Have we run rotate?
Yeah.
Well, shoot. Oh, I've got rotate further down in my notes. Let's learn rotate really quick. I should, for future reference, I'm gonna move that up. So that next time we know how to do rotate already. Okay, so let's talk about rotate really quick. The rotate tool, it looks like the two arrows that are kind of chasing each other in a circle, or the hotkey for it is Q. Q is a weird one, but it's Q for rotate. Again, we know how to change that if we don't like Q. Window, preferences, shortcuts, change it if you don't like it. Okay, so in the rotate tool, whenever you activate it, it looks kind of like this protractor looking guy. You can double protractor, I guess. And pretty self-explanatory. Rotate tool rotates geometry. First, you need to, I'm gonna create another cube here. I just like making cubes to show things. Okay, so with the rotate tool, you need to select your object first. Just like with the move tool, we select our object first. You can, okay, so whenever you activate that tool, it will start to, if you hover it over different faces, it will align itself to those faces so that we can rotate in different directions. Or you can also, if you're having a really hard time finding kind of the axis that you want to rotate on, you can use your arrow keys. Left and right toggles between the green and the red, and then up gives you the blue. You can use your arrow keys there to find whatever axis you want. And then once you do find that axis, whether it's using your arrow keys or if it's hovering over a face, you can hold down Shift to keep that locked in place so that then it won't start to flip all around on you whenever you go to hover over different faces. So I'm holding down Shift right now and it's staying locked on that blue axis. And then whenever you're ready to rotate, oops, my cube is no longer selected. When you're ready to rotate, you want to grab whatever the center of rotation is going to be for you. I'm going to make it just the origin point. I'll rotate around just this corner piece here. You click on that center of rotation, and then you just kind of want to define like a 0 point because we're going to type in an angle next, so you want to determine where your 0 is. I usually just put that along one of my axes. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. But once I'm along that axis, I'm going to click again to kind of just set that as my line. And then I start to move my mouse, and my object is going to rotate with me. You can just click to finish that rotation, or we can type in an angle. So if you want to type in an angle, after you've set that axis and you're moving your mouse, you just type in whatever angle you want. So I'll type in 45, enter. I rotated at a 45 degree angle. Yeah. Easy enough? Okay, now we know how to use that. So let's go back. Yes? Somebody say something?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Totally lost.
Yeah, we can go through it again. Let me draw my cube there. And bigger. Okay, so with your cube selected, or whatever object you're rotating, activate rotate either up here or with Q on your keyboard. And just for fun, let's see what happens if I choose a different plane this time, or a different axis. I can just hover. I'm not clicking, dragging, anything. I'm just hovering over these different faces, and it's kind of flipping what way it's going to rotate for me. Let's say I want the green this time. If I was having a hard time finding the green, I can use my arrow keys to go back and forth between green and red, with left and right, or up for the blue. So once I find that one, I can hold down Shift to keep it locked on that. I will grab a point as the center of my rotation, wherever I want that to be. And then I'll click to start it there. And then it's just asking you, it's actually telling you down in the corner what it's wanting you to do next. You move your cursor to locate the starting point of rotation and click to begin rotation. So I'm just gonna, I like to find it along an axis. That's usually the easiest. So I'm just gonna click along that red axis. And then once I do that click, then it'll start to rotate for me. I'm not dragging, I just clicked and now I'm moving my mouse, rotating all around. I can either click once I've found that rotation point that I want, or I can type in an angle. I'll I'll type in 30 this time.
And I did it last time and this time, my cube totally just.
Okay. Now I think we're good to move ahead. Radial array. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna set myself back up at my top view. And parallel projection. Okay, so in this instance, I'm gonna rotate this rectangle. Let's just start with a 180. And I'm gonna use the intersection of my guidelines to be that center of rotation. So with my object selected, I've got my rectangle selected. I'm gonna activate rotate. And then we want to, again, since we're creating copies, we can do control here to activate that copy. This is the same for rotate. If you want to rotate an object and leave a copy in its place rather than rotating your original object, you can do the same thing. Just click control. Let's not even look at radial array yet. I've got that control key copied, or control key activated, so you can see the plus sign near my cursor. And I can rotate a copy instead of my original object. So a copy works for rotate as well. For radial array, I've got that rectangle selected, rotate tool activated. We are going to go ahead and hit control for copy because we are creating copies with the radial array. You'll choose your center point of rotation. So for this, I'm using the intersection here of my guidelines. So I've clicked there to specify that center of rotation. I'm going to locate kind of that starting point, so I'm just going to go here along this axis and click again. And then now that it's starting, this is where it's a little bit different from the linear array. I'm not going to finish this copy command. I'm just going to go ahead and immediately type what angle I'm working with. So in this instance, I'm just going to do 180. So we're just going to do a half circle. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 180. So I started that copy rotate, but I did not click to finish it. So I type 180, enter. And then if I immediately type in that times 5, we're doing x5, enter. Oops, I didn't do something right. This one always kind of throws me for a loop. Let's try it again. Got my object selected. Let me read my notes here real quick, make sure I didn't do anything wrong.
If you were to just leave that would they just be stacked on one another? So it's 180. Times 5.
180 would just be, well, it's going to give you, it puts the one at the 180 point and then it fills in that in between. Yeah, let's see if I can do it correctly. Alright, I've got my rotation point here. I do have control on. Here, start to move. I start rotating, type out the rotation angle. So
Oh, it did.
180, enter, X5. Why are you not looking?
My thing moved back.
I'm confused why this isn't working. What am I doing wrong?
Are we supposed to do like negative 180?
No.
Don't even ask me.
Oh, there was my problem. Okay. Redo, we're starting again.
Good. Second loss.
I got stuff everywhere.
I don't know how you could have followed me there. but,
I don't know, I just made it up. I was like,
Oh my gosh,
I
I
got
got one
OCD.
rectangle.
Trying again. I have my rectangle selected. I'm gonna activate the rotate key. And go ahead and click Control for copy.
click control of the copy.
Get your starting point, your center of rotation. Click there. Go ahead and find kind of your starting line. So I'm gonna go along my axis here and click again. Start to move your mouse. Type in the angle that you want. So I'm gonna do 180 and enter.
How'd you grab that rectangle to it? I've just got my line, my guideline, my grid lines underneath. How'd you grab the second rectangle? Didn't you do copy?
I've only got one rectangle. I've selected the entire rectangle.
Oh, you selected it, okay.
Yep, you have to have it
Before-
selected
Before
first.
you hit
Yeah.
rotate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
find that center of rotation. Make sure you've got control activated. Get your starting line. Start to move away. I'm not clicking yet. I'm just gonna type in my angle, 180, enter, and then type the backslash and the total number of copies. So I did /5. And so 5 is that one that came to the 180, and then there are 4 equally spaced between it. Radial array doesn't have the 2 options, as far as I'm aware. You can only do it specifying by the angle and the total number of copies you want to fill between that angle.
Easy for you.
Do it again, just in case we're a little lost. Let's do it with 270 this time.
How do you hit that view?
The top view,
Yeah.
you go to camera, standard views, and top.
Oh.
And then again, camera, make sure it's set to parallel projection and you won't see any depth, any perspective to it. It'll be more two-dimensional.
Okay, where is it?
Camera, standard views, and top. And then again, on camera, make sure parallel projection is checked, and that's gonna give you the more two-dimensional look to it.
And then make sure what is changed.
Parallel projection under camera.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's try it again with 270 as the angle. So I've got my rectangle selected, activating the rotate tool. Find that center of rotation and click there. Create a starting line. Click again. Oops. Make sure you've got control activated. And then I'll type 270 this time. Enter, and then immediately the backslash and the number of copies you want, and enter.
Oh,
So
okay.
this time, my 5th copy is at the 270 angle, and I've got 4 between.
270, I got that, and then you did backsplash?
Yep, I did 270 enter, and then immediately the backslash and the total number of copies. Got it? Nice. We okay enough with that? We will try to get in our assignment? Yeah. You got something?
We're gonna try it again first.
Yeah, because I'm just lost.
Okay, we'll try it again.
I think I messed up my whole.
We'll revisit.
My guidelines.
Okay, we're also going to look at the arc and circle tools today. So, let's just start with the arc tool.
Are you back to the regular view? Or are you still in parallel?
I'm in perspective now.
How did you change it back? Did you do
Up in
that?
camera, you just need to specify which one is checked. Parallel projection, perspective, or 2-point perspective.
Right, but
just did that without us seeing it.
I actually didn't, mine was still at parallel projection.
Oh, it was.
And once you said something, I was like, oh yes, I do need to change it back.
So Carol.
Yeah, perspective. Okay, so the ARC tool is gonna be up here. It's actually under a drop-down menu. It's got like 3 dots. There's an arc coming off of one of them. Drop down, and you've got a couple of different types of arcs. We're gonna be working with a 2-point arc, and its hotkey is A. So for the 2-point arc, you specify 2 points, and then you pull the arc up from those 2 points. So I'm going to just start 1 at the origin here, and I'm going to come along the red axis. You can specify that length. Maybe I want 5 feet here, so I just typed 5 feet, enter, and that actually gave me my second point 5 feet away. And then I just am pulling my mouse away. I'm not dragging, it's just my mouse pulling away. And you can see that inference engine working, telling me that it is pulling along the green axis here, so I know I'm flat, I'm not at some funky angle. I can even pull it up along the blue if I want to come up rather than over. And then you can either, click to finish when you found the point that you want it to be at, or again, we can specify this distance, kind of this radius for the arc. So maybe I want this one to be 2 feet, so I type 2 feet, enter, and it gives me that arc with a 2-foot radius. Let's try it again. Let me pull it away from the axis so it's a little bit maybe easier to see. I click to start. And it's kind of telling you which axis you're going along. So then I can just click for a second endpoint, or you can type in a measurement for a specific length here. And then just start to pull your mouse away. No dragging. I just click, move the mouse away, and I can just click again to finish. Or again, I can specify that radius for the voltage. And arcs, and actually this is true of any kind of curve in SketchUp. If you look real close, it's actually just made up of a bunch of straight lines. SketchUp doesn't actually do curves very well, so it just makes a bunch of straight lines to appear like a curve. And you can also change how many lines there are making up this arc. I don't really know that you ever really need to, but just kind of teaching you that these things exist, I guess. The default is just 12. It'll, no matter what size your arc is, it's just going to come up with 12 straight lines to make that arc. But you can change that. Let's say I want it to double. I want 24 lines to make up that arc. Maybe it'll seem a little bit smoother then if I have more lines. To change that, you just need to activate the arc tool. And you can actually see down in your measurement box, it tells me there are 12 sides. So it's just kind of letting you know, like, hey, there are 12 lines making up this arc. Without even doing anything, not creating an arc at all, you can just type in a new number. So I just typed in 24, and you can see it changing down here. If I, let's see here, A, 24. Now if I make a new arc, this one should now be made up of 24 straight lines. And see, it looks a little bit smoother than my other one. See, these are longer straight lines. This one does look a little bit more curved because I added more lines to it. Again, you can definitely keep the 12 default, just kind of a preference thing if you want it to look a little bit smoother. And then that actually, once you change it, it's going to stay at that new number that you chose. So I just reactivated the arc tool, and it's staying at 24. So if I want it to go back to 12, I have to change it again, type in the 12, and now the new arc that I create will have those 12 sides again.
Wow.
That's actually true of most tools. Let's take a look at the circle really quick. Circle tool, you can hit C on your keyboard, or it's also under a drop down. It actually shares with the rectangle tool, so you can use that drop down and get to the circle, or just use C. For the circle tool, you start with the center point of the circle. So I'll just go ahead and use the origin as my center point. So I select a center point, and I can just start to move my mouse outward to make my circle bigger or smaller. And you'll see down in the bottom right, the radius is changing with you as you move your mouse in and out, that dynamic measurement box. But you can also specify a radius. Just like you can with most tools, you can make it really accurate. So this one is asking us for a radius, so I can type in 2 feet, enter, and that created a circle with the surface between it because it knows that we have a closed loop of edges, so it goes ahead and throws us a surface in there. And if I check on that radius, the center point to one of my sides, it is 2 feet. So just like with the arc, you can see that this is made up of a bunch of straight lines rather than actually being curved. So if we activate the circle tool again and go down to our measurement box, circle's default is 24 lines.
Yep.
So if we wanted that to change, we can change it. Maybe I type in 48. And then the next circle that I create, lots of smaller lines, because now there are 48 lines making up that circle rather than the 24. And again, that's going to stay until you change it back. So when I activate circle again, that 48 is still there, so if I want to change it back to 24, I just type 24 before I create my next circle. This actually happens with other tools sometimes, and I didn't know this until last semester. Somebody kept hitting, I don't remember if it was the circle tool or the rectangle tool, but she would put R for the rectangle, let's say it was rectangle, and it was giving her a triangle. And I was like, I have never seen this before, this is bizarre. Same issue. Somehow her default number for rectangle got changed to 3 sides instead of 4, and so it was like, I'm giving you a 3-sided rectangle. So if you're ever like, what the heck, why is my rectangle a triangle or whatever it may be, it's going to be this issue where it's the default number of sides for that tool. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but if you ever find a triangle, come back to this moment. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, one last little tip here. I think we looked at this with the rectangle tool. You know, you can either specify your dimensions before you create the rectangle, or you can create a rectangle and then immediately type your dimensions and it'll auto resize to those dimensions. Same thing with the circle. We could specify the radius now as we're creating the circle, or we can just create the circle, immediately type in a radius, 2 feet, enter, and it'll automatically resize for you. Neither way is right or wrong, just whatever you prefer. And then finally, if we wanted to turn this circle into more of like an oval or an ellipse, there's not a tool in SketchUp to do that, so we just have to use the scale tool to modify the circle. So if I've got my circle selected, I can activate the scale tool. Again, that was just S on my keyboard. And then now I can use kind of these side grips to pull inward. Again, you can hit the control key and it'll start to move inward towards the center. So if you're wanting to create more of an ellipse shape, the scale tool is going to be what we're going to use here. this way too. Whatever you might need. Good so far? You looking for someone? Okay, we are very briefly going to be introduced to materials in today's assignment. I'm not going to get very much into it just yet, but just know that the way that we get there, let's say I've got a rectangle that I want to apply a material to. Over in our default tray here, we've got a materials panel. You can drop that down. And then there's also just kind of a little drop-down menu here where you can see all the different collections of materials. There's one for brick and siding and all of that stuff. These are just kind of SketchUp's default materials. So you can look through the different collections. There's one for metals. There's one for just plain colors as well, if you're looking for a color rather than a material. Again, this is in your default tray. If you don't have that, go to Window, hover over Default Tray and Show Tray, so then your materials will be over here. And we'll get more into the material palette as we go throughout the semester, but for right now, just know you can, once you find the material that you want, you can click on that, and then your cursor is going to turn into like a paint bucket, and then you just click on the surface that you want to paint, or apply the material to. You can change it as many times as you'd like. Maybe I actually want to change it to more of a tile. I'm going to look at SketchUp's tile selection it's got here. Maybe I like this one. Click on it and paint it. That's about as detailed as we're going to get today with materials. There's so many things you can do with materials in SketchUp, but this is as far as we're going to go today.
It's giving us a taste.
Just a taste to be able to finish the assignment. Okay, then I got two more tools to talk about. The first one is the offset tool. I'll go ahead and create a rectangle again. The offset tool creates copies of faces and edges just at a specified distance from the originals. So the offset tool, it kind of looks like this arch that's being pulled outward, or the hotkey is F for this one.
F.
So what's that?
F is right.
F, yes, great. So with this one, it can work a couple of ways. If you've got a surface that you are wanting to offset all of the edges for, then you don't need to have anything selected first. You can just hover your mouse over that surface and you'll see that it brings up that dotted hatch pattern, and there's a little red square that's kind of defining the edges of your surface here. If I just click on my surface, I can start to pull inward. I'm not dragging, I just clicked, and then I'm pulling my mouse either inward or outward. You can see that it's creating offset copies of those edges. And then let's say I want to make it bigger, I can click again to finish. And it copied not only the edges, but also gave me another surface in place there. You can also, I just Control Z to undo that. You can specify the distance for your offset, just like we can with most other tools. Let's say I want to offset this 2 inches inward. I'll go ahead and select my surface, start to move my mouse inward, and then I can type to enter, and it should have offset 2 inches inward. We can also do this just with edges, even if we don't have a surface just yet. Let me create a couple of lines, or let's go straight. A couple of lines here. The only difference here is I do need to go ahead and select all of those edges first to make sure that they all get offset. So I can select those edges, hit F for the offset tool, click on those edges, and then you can offset them in either direction. Again, you can specify that distance. I'll type again to enter, and it offset those 2 inches. Seem okay? Okay, very last tool. I'm gonna create kind of a funky object here. We're gonna look at the flip tool, so I wanna make sure we can definitely tell when this object is being flipped. If I just do a cube, no one's gonna know if I flipped it, because it looks the exact same all the way around. So let me just create something here that's a little different. Okay. And I'm gonna group it just so it's easier for me to work with. Okay, so the flip tool, you're actually not going to find the flip tool as part of your textbook. Prior to SketchUp 2023, maybe, the flip tool didn't exist. So you're not going to find it in your textbook, but we're going to talk about it. So the flip tool, there is unfortunately no default hotkey for it. You make one if you'd like. But what it looks like is a little triangle. One half is white, one half is blue, and there's a dashed red line going through it, showing that it's being flipped. So for this one, we do need to select our object first. So I'm going to get the objects that I want flipped selected first. So I've got my group selected. Activate the flip tool. And then once you do that, it's going to pull up the different axes colors on your object. And what it's asking is basically just select which plane you want to flip over. So if I click on the red one, it's going to flip on the opposite side of that red one.
Okay.
What might be a little bit confusing is that the red is kind of perpendicular to your red axis. So it's actually flipping along the red axis. Same thing with the green here, it's kind of perpendicular, so that might be a little bit confusing to you. But it's just gonna flip along this plane. So the green one is kind of acting as my center point here. If I click on that plane, it then flipped it about the green. Same thing, I can do the blue. If I click on the blue, flipped it upside down.
What's the key for the flip?
There is no hotkey.
Oh,
It's just the triangle that's flipped.
okay.
I don't hear me.
And if you don't have it up there, it's under Tools in your menu bar and Flip. You can also create copies of the flip with the flip tool. So see a little bit, get back to where it was. Activate that again. And what modifier key do we think it is to copy?
The M for move and then control.
Control, there it is. Control is always going to be your copy. So I can click on that control. I've got a plus sign now next to my cursor. And then if I click on one of those planes here, I'll click on the red one. I now have, it might be a little bit difficult to see, but there are now two of them. I created a copy of my flip. So my original one is still in place, and I've created a copy that is flipped.
When would you ever use that, really? Like,
The flip tool?
I mean, that specific situation where you copy and flip it.
Let's see here. What might I want to create a copy and flip of? We're kind of gonna do it today in our lesson. I think I've actually written the instructions a little bit backwards, where we copy it first and then later flip it. But let's say that you've created a cabinet, maybe a cabinet door, and you make it exactly what you want, but then you're like, well, I need another cabinet door because I want it to open like this. Yeah, so we would just create a flipped copy, so then both of our handles are on the inside and we can open it up this way.
Okay, perfect example.
So it's the same concept as mirror and CAD?
Yes,
Like
it is
mirror.
mirror.
Oh, that's
Okay.
a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Correct. We can also, let's say, I'm not following along with the axis, only do this in specific instances. I just want to show you something. it doesn't necessarily have to be those 3 planes that showed up for us that we can flip along. So again, I'm gonna select my object, activate the flip tool. I can go click on another face that's in my model, and I can use it as kind of my axis that I'm gonna flip around. So if I click on that face, it just flipped along whatever that angle is. It's close to a 45. But it kind of used that as its path to flip over. You can also click on just a face that's in your object. Like if I don't want it to be along the center here, but maybe I want it on the side of my object here, I can just click on the side of my object and it'll flip around to that. You can also move these. I can click and drag on this. So let's say I do still want to flip around the red, but maybe I want it to flip from way over here. Once I released, this was now that center point of where my flip took place. Because you don't always want to flip directly on the midpoint of your object. Let's say, maybe I have a very specific line that I want to flip along and create a copy over here. Grab that object, flip tool, I'm going to click and drag this plane, and then I can use my inference engine to line myself up. I can just hover over an endpoint, and that axis is going to snap to that line, and then once I release, boom, it flipped over that line. Make sense? Okay.